It appears that the Minneapolis police officer whose actions had led to the death of George Floyd had a history of complaints against him. Now, this is according to NBC News. Derek Chauvin was the subject of about a dozen complaints over a 19-year career. Now, one of them even included discharging his weapon during an encounter with the suspect. So now, Mylon Mason, who's a retired Minneapolis Park police officer, longtime police training expert for the state of Minnesota, said this. He said, look, a lot of cops get a history of complaints, right? But his history appears to be a little bit higher than normal. Like, he's gotten a few more complaints. Now, he also says, look, a little bit of a caveat here. A lot of police get, complaints, as anybody can file them. It's just that he seems to get more complaints than anyone else. Little strange. But then when you look at what he did, which is clearly on camera, literally having his knee on a man's neck during an arrest. This is someone who was not resisting arrest, who was not violent, who, was like asking for, hey, he begging for air, begging for something to drink during the time that he was down on the ground before he passed out, lost consciousness, and then died, basically. So what do we know about the complaints against this guy? It turns out we don't know a whole lot. So I'm going to go through some of these, and you're going to see a pattern here. Now, in 2006, Chauvin was one of 6 officers from the 3rd Precinct who responded to a stabbing at a Minneapolis home. Police said Wayne Reyes stabbed his friend and his girlfriend and threatened to kill them all with a shotgun. Well, that's a pretty serious crime. And so this seems like a very dangerous person, right? So now police had pursued Reyes, who fled in his truck, got out with a shotgun, and of course, several officers fired multiple shots, killing the man, police said in a report. However, it was unclear during the initial investigation which officers fired their weapons and whether Reyes had actually made any verbal or physical threats. So we don't know what happened, really, the details of it. All of the officers, including Chauvin, were put on paid leave during an investigation, which is standard protocol, right? And it is unclear what happened with the investigation. Minneapolis police, of course, did not respond to a request for Chauvin's service record. So I don't know what happened there, and we don't know what happened. Now, maybe they were threatened. Maybe he was, maybe all of those officers were completely within their rights to kill Mr. Reyes. We don't know. I don't know. There's no details. So I don't know. Man. Same year, Chauvin and 7 others were named in an unrelated federal lawsuit filed by an inmate at the Minnesota Correctional Facility at Lino Lakes. Further information was not available. Records showed the case was dismissed without prejudice in 2007. And without prejudice, I believe, means they can file again. With prejudice, if it's, if it is excused with prejudice, it means that you cannot file again. So I don't know necessarily if that means that there was something there to that case. I don't know. Now, in 2008, Chauvin and a second officer were called to a residence for a domestic disturbance. According to police, Ira Littell Toles was holed up in a bathroom and tried to escape when Chauvin got inside. When Toles refused to obey Chauvin's order to get down, police said a struggle began, and Toles allegedly grabbed for his weapon. And look, we've seen that. Sometimes they do grab for weapons. Sometimes that's an excuse to beat the crap out of them. Chauvin, in this case, didn't just beat the crap out of him. Fired twice, hitting Toles in the abdomen. Now, Toles was taken to the hospital and survived. Again, we don't know the details of this, right? However, Chauvin and the other officer, who was not named, were placed on paid leave during an investigation, which is standard protocol. Police did not respond to a request for information about the outcome of the investigation. Again, we have no information here, right? The newspaper said that earlier in 2008, Chauvin was awarded a Department Medal of Valor for his response in an incident involving a man armed with a gun. He was recognized again in 2009 by that same police department. And of course, in 2011, Chauvin was again placed on temporary leave after he responded to the scene of a shooting. Police said that Leroy Martinez drew his gun near a playground at the Little Earth of United Tribes public housing complex, and that an officer shot him after he refused to drop the gun and listen to commands. Chauvin and other officers arrived at the scene, and while none of them fired their weapons, they were all placed on standard administrative leave as part of the investigation. Tim Dolan, then the police chief, later said that officers, including Chauvin, had acted appropriately and courageously. Chauvin had also been the subject of complaints listed in the city's Office of Police Conduct database. Details of those cases were unavailable. After they closed and listed as non-public, they resulted in no discipline. So Minneapolis police also did not respond to a request on Wednesday for comment or more information about Chauvin's disciplinary record. So what we've learned from that is basically nothing. We don't know the result of any of these investigations, only that only that he was cleared from basically everything. Okay, so look, let me just say that I have a bias here. I'm going to be very skeptical of this, and I'm very honest when I say I have a bias against police, right? Now, it's very possible that Chauvin acted completely 100% appropriately in all of these circumstances. That's definitely a possibility, of course. But what they can't argue against is the fact that his actions actually did lead to the needless death of George Floyd. So he could have acted perfectly fine in all those other instances, but in this instance, he did not, and it led to the death of George Floyd. We know that Floyd was not resisting arrest. We know that from video footage that was released during his arrest. And that makes me think that maybe there's a possibility that some of those complaints might have been legit, but that the higher up, the brass, didn't really care about it. Didn't care about it, didn't take it into consideration, or they sided with the officer. There is, of course, that blue line, right? And they all tend to back each other no matter what happens. But I could be wrong about that, and I understand that. And so I think power, though, favors power, as always. And, of course, that's maybe why these complaints never really turned out to anything. Or, of course, like I said, these complaints might have not been legitimate. I don't know. We just don't know. Now, that said, what happened to George Floyd, inexcusable. Inexcusable. And we've got plenty of evidence of that. So much so that Chauvin and the other three officers that were involved in this were fired. Very, very clear evidence against him. And I think that they should go a little bit further and make him be held accountable, or all of them be held accountable, for George Floyd's death. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.